We are continuing our study in the Gospel of Matthew, and we pick up the story in Matthew chapter 4 and verses 21 and 22. I am going to read those verses from the Weymouth translation. He, that is Jesus, saw two other brothers, James the son of Zebedee and his brother John, in the boat with their father Zebedee, mending their nets, and he called them. And they at once left the boat and their father and followed him. When people think of following, the cost of following Jesus, what comes to mind? If we went back to the late 19th century, for some people it was a thought that they could end up in deepest, darkest Africa. Africa at the end of the 19th century was a place filled with diseases that the Western world was in fear of. We had no ability in the West to deal with these diseases and were vulnerable to them if one went to Africa. So in the 19th century, there were a number of people who went to Africa as missionaries from the Western world. And one of the things that was known is that you could literally die there. So to threaten a potential convert to Christ was to say, you could end up in Africa and you will have to take your coffin. So would you want to be a convert to the Christian faith? In medieval Europe, I suppose if we could go back and find records, which I don't think they're there, we could probably say that some people were told, you take that Christian faith seriously and you can end up in a monastery as a monk or a convent as a nun. You take that faith seriously and you could throw away the idea of marriage and family. In the first century, a conservative Jew who is considering following Jesus could be told, look what happened to that person over there. That person over there, they became an apostle to the Gentiles. You come to the faith, the Christian faith, and you can end up with working with those dirty dogs, those Gentiles. And every day and age, there are potential threats for those who seek to follow Christ. There is a cost. You notice in each of these, I'm trying to give the worst case scenario. And every age, there are the perceived cost to following Jesus, and they are sometimes used to warn potential converts by non-Christians of the danger of what happens when you follow Jesus. In the three examples above, there were people for whom each of these things became a part of what it meant to follow Christ. My point is that in each of those eras, to follow Christ did not necessarily mean doing one of those things for all people. For some, yes, but not all. In Jesus' day, there were some for whom following Jesus meant leaving their boats and nets behind. Now stop and think about it. If everyone who followed Jesus had to leave their nets and their boats behind, it probably lead to a problem with food production. Yes, there is a cost to following Jesus, but there is never one prescribed way to fulfill that call. The danger in every era is that we make the following of Jesus to be in only one way. Or we can say there is a better way to follow Jesus. And the latter option, we say you are a Christian, but if you want to be a great Christian, you will do this. We are coming out of an era when the work of Christian missions and the call to be a missionary has dominated the imagination of the evangelical church. Now, for those people who were called of God and went, that is good, fine, and noble. That is what faith can do. The danger is that a person can go, oh, I want to be a Christian. I need to go become a missionary. And you can end up with people going all over the world and saying, look, God, I'm a missionary. I am doing something wonderful, fine, and good. Notice the problem. If God has not called you to be a missionary to end up in deepest, darkest, wherever, is not a faith experience. It is my assertion of my will. God does not call us to some prescribed task. God calls us to be obedient. And for some people, that might have been to remain on the farm in Iowa or to teach in a public school in a rural setting. The point is, to follow Jesus is not about doing something that is prescribed. It is about obedience to the will of God for my life and your life. There is a danger when we read the story of the first two sets of brothers coming and following Jesus that we get caught up in the image and lose sight of the truth. To these men, to be true to the gospel and obedient to the faith meant leaving the world of the everyday behind. But this was not the call for everyone. Yes, God may call you and me to a radical change of lifestyle, but he also may not. The church is always in danger of minimizing the importance of those who must live out the faith where they are. So there were some men who could only serve Jesus by leaving their nets behind, and there were many who served Jesus by continuing to cast their nets into the sea.